The silence was the loudest thing left in the world. No cars, no voices, no cities humming with life. Only the wind moving through broken buildings, whispering over cracked pavement, and the distant shuffle of feet that no longer remembered how to walk like humans. This was the world now, hollowed out, stripped of its warmth. And inside its final pocket of resistance, 50 survivors clung to hope like it was the last weapon they had. The place was called Zone Echo, though no one remembered who had first named it. A reinforced dome of crumbling buildings and barricades built over the ruins of an old suburban shopping district, abandoned when the outbreak first began. What was once a mall, a cinema, and a food court had become a fortress stitched together with sheet metal, barbed wire, and willpower. It was inside this makeshift shelter that the survivors lived, ate, and fought. At the center was Commander Iris Vance, a former disaster response medic who had taken charge not because she wanted to, but because no one else could. She stood on the edge of the rooftop that overlooked the outer barrier. Her eyes scanned the distant fog. She wasn't searching for danger, danger never stopped. She was looking for change, anything that meant the world was shifting, that maybe rescue was coming. But the fog never answered. Behind her, a scout named Marlo Reyes emerged from the stairwell, panting. "They're testing the fences again," he said between breaths. "South End." Slow, but more than usual. Iris didn't flinch. "How many?" "Too many for comfort. Maybe 20. Maybe more behind them." That word, comfort, had almost lost meaning. In the dead zone, there was no comfort. Just days survived and nights endured. "Sound the alert," Iris said. "But no panic. We've faced worse." Marlo nodded and vanished. Iris stared into the mist a second longer before heading down. She passed the makeshift infirmary where Dr. Elia Mendez, a former pediatrician turned field medic, was disinfecting scavenged bandages. Every survivor here had a role, some guarded, some cooked, some kept watch. Others, like Elia, kept the fear at bay with small acts of care. In the main atrium of the mall, survivors were gathered under the cracked skylight. The sunlight bled through like a dying flame, barely enough to light the faces of the people sitting in silent anticipation. "Listen up," Iris called out as she stood on a platform made of 2 broken benches. "We've got movement south of the zone. You know the drill. Everyone sticks to assigned areas. No solo missions. No surprises." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Some nodded, some just stared. The younger ones, like Nico, only 16 and already forced to carry a weapon, looked especially shaken. But no one argued. From a darkened corner, Juno Harlow, the group's communications tech, called out, "Still no response from the northern outposts. Been trying all day." Iris turned her gaze to Juno. "Keep trying. If they're alive, we'll hear back." But everyone was thinking the same thing. They hadn't heard a reply in weeks. The northern outposts may be gone. Just like the others. Later that evening, the sound of thunder rolled overhead. But it wasn't thunder, it was the heavy thud of the undead slamming against the barricades again. That meant they had found something. A scent. A sound. A weakness. Inside the zone, lights dimmed as the survivors went into lockdown. Flashlights flickered. The vents groaned. Down in the loading docks, a rotating team of guards took positions behind armored doors. Nico sat next to Corbin, an older man who'd once been a firefighter. The boy shook, trying to keep his hands steady on the rifle. "You okay, kid?" Corbin asked gently. "I don't think I can do it," Nico whispered. "You don't have to want to," Corbin replied. "You just have to be ready. For the people behind you." And just like that, Nico straightened his shoulders. Because in the dead zone, bravery wasn't about fearlessness. It was about protecting each other, even when fear wanted to swallow you whole. An hour passed. Then another. The pounding stopped. The scouts went out just before dawn, 4 of them, including Marlowe, and what they saw turned the zone cold. The south barrier was intact. But the bodies were gone. Every last walker that had pounded at the walls, gone without a trace. No blood. No trail. No signs of a fight. Just silence. Iris stood over the perimeter and narrowed her eyes. Something's wrong. What could make the dead leave? Elia asked. Marlowe swallowed hard. Maybe they didn't leave. The words trailed off as they all looked into the trees beyond the fence. Something out there was watching. Something smarter. Something waiting. And just like that, hope inside the final dead zone began to flicker. But it did not die. The trees beyond the southern barrier swayed, but there was no wind. Commander Iris Vance kept her eyes locked on the shifting shadows. She didn't speak, didn't breathe too loud, afraid that whatever had taken the dead might hear her. Behind her, Marlowe and Elia stood frozen, the morning fog clinging to their faces like sweat. The air felt heavier than usual, like the world was holding its breath. What are we dealing with? Elia asked. No idea, Iris said. But I don't like it. Marlowe pointed to the dirt near the fence. No drag marks, no scattered limbs, they didn't scatter. They just disappeared. That was impossible. The undead didn't retreat. They didn't strategize. They didn't hide. Iris tapped her radio. Juno, patch into camera 5 and 6. Give me the southern feed. Static crackled. Then Juno's voice came through, camera 5 is dark. 6 is glitching, might have taken damage during last night's pounding. Check the wiring. Manually if needed, Iris ordered. We need to know what's out there. Back inside Zone Echo, the survivors had started to whisper. Whispers led to fear, and fear led to chaos. Iris knew it all too well. The group was stable, but barely. Food was being rationed tighter than ever, the fuel for generators was almost gone, and now the undead were doing things they'd never done before, things that made no sense. In the dining hall, Corbin leaned over a cracked map with Juno, Nico, and Asha, a quiet young woman who used to be a geologist before the world ended. Her knowledge of terrain and tunnels had saved the group more than once. I'm telling you, Corbin muttered, tracing the route from the south fence to an old maintenance tunnel, if the walkers got pulled underground, we'd see cave-ins or hear collapse. But we heard nothing. There's another possibility, Asha said softly. Everyone looked at her. What if we're not the only ones left, and they've figured out how to lure the dead? Nico frowned. You mean like control them? Asha nodded. We've seen them follow noise, heat, scent. But if someone's using those things strategically, then yes. They could have led them away. That idea sent a ripple through the group. Hope and terror, stitched together. Juno shook her head. But who would risk drawing that many undead? No one's that crazy. Or desperate, Corbin added. Before they could argue more, the radio crackled again. It's Iris, came the commander's voice. Scouts to the watchtower now. Something's moving again. Within minutes, the scouts gathered inside the metal tower above the eastern fence. Through binoculars, Marlowe could see movement, figures. But these weren't walkers. These were people. Moving fast. Stumbling. Running. Survivors, he said. Maybe 6 of them. Are they being chased? Iris asked. Hard to tell. Marlowe adjusted focus. Wait, something's wrong. They're waving, but it looks weird. Uncoordinated. Like they're drunk. Elia squinted. Or infected. Iris hesitated. Could be early stage. They're not fully turned yet. Nico's voice came over the secondary radio. Should we open the gates? No, Iris said immediately. We don't open for unknowns. But if they're people. If they're infected, they'll turn once they're inside. One bite is all it takes, Nico. We can't risk the zone. The 6 figures came closer. Now everyone could see them. A woman tripped and fell. A man tried to lift her but fumbled, his movements sluggish. Then the group halted just short of the fence and began clawing at it, clumsy, pitiful attempts. And then, they screamed. Not words. Just howls. Screams full of pain, like something was burning from the inside. Their limbs jerked. One fell backward, twitching violently. Another collapsed, mouth foaming, eyes rolling up into her head. What the hell is this? Elia gasped. Iris stared in disbelief. The 6 strangers weren't being chased. They were dying. Right there, feet from the safety of the wall. Within 2 minutes, they were still. But not dead. They began to rise, sharply. Smoothly. Too fast. Their backs arched. Their heads snapped toward the zone. And then they ran. Not the slow stumble of a normal walker. These things charged the gate like hounds. Iris didn't hesitate. Sound the alarm, she barked. Klaxons rang across the zone. Guards flooded the southern and eastern walls. The new variants slammed against the fences with terrifying speed. Metal groaned. They're smarter, Marlowe whispered. Faster. Elia backed away. This isn't infection. This is mutation. Iris gritted her teeth. Then we need new rules. And above them all, on a distant rooftop, someone, watched through binoculars. They spoke softly into a hidden radio. Zone Echo has seen the prototypes. Phase 1 is complete. Proceed with Phase 2. The prototypes were gone, but their impact lingered like smoke after a fire. Zone Echo remained on high alert through the night. Every corner was watched, every noise investigated. Sleep came in small, broken pieces. But no one forgot the way those 6 things had moved. They weren't mindless like the others. They had screamed. Then they ran. And worse, they had almost broken the gate. At dawn, Iris stood in the control room, face lit by weak generator-powered monitors. Juno sat at the console beside her, trying to stabilize the glitchy feeds from the southern and eastern cameras. I've seen walkers do a lot of things, Iris muttered. But those 6, that wasn't random infection. That was controlled. You think someone sent them? Juno asked. Iris didn't answer at first. Then she said quietly, no. I think someone made them. In the hallway, Elia, Asha, and Marlowe reviewed the bodies they'd pulled into a sealed room. Iris had ordered their capture rather than disposal. It was a dangerous choice, but it might save lives. 3 corpses now lay on makeshift stretchers. They were bloated with blood, their skin blotched like chemical burns. Elia had never seen infection work this fast. No bite marks, Elia said, pulling off her gloves. Whatever turned them, it wasn't the virus we know. Asha pointed to the bulging veins running up the neck of one of the dead. These patterns, unnatural. Almost like something injected them. That means someone's experimenting, Marlowe said grimly. With walkers. With people. And they're close enough to drop test subjects at our door, Elia added. A new kind of silence filled the room, not the eerie emptiness of the undead, but the silence of realization. There was something worse than the dead out there now. There were people who still played God. Back in the central plaza of Zone Echo, the survivors gathered again. Commander Iris climbed atop her usual platform. Her face was harder now, still calm, but sharper. She had made a decision. We're no longer dealing with mindless walkers, she said. Whatever attacked the fence last night wasn't random. Someone is testing us. Using infected bodies like weapons. Whispers broke out, but Iris silenced them with a raised hand. I'm creating a recon team, she said. We need answers. A controlled mission outside the zone. We follow the tracks, locate the source, and assess the threat. In and out. Who's going? Someone asked. I'll lead, Iris replied. Marlo, Asha, and Nico. Gasps followed. Nico, still young, looked up with wide eyes. Me? You've proven yourself, Iris said. And you know the east tunnels better than anyone. He swallowed hard, but nodded. Before they departed, Juno handed Iris a small drone, one of the last two they had. It could only fly for 10 minutes, but it might give them eyes behind enemy lines. Don't lose it, Juno said. And don't die. We need our commander. Iris allowed herself the faintest smile. You'll hold things together while I'm gone. The four set out by midday, slipping through a sealed service hatch on the east side. The tunnel they entered once carried maintenance crews underground. Now it was damp, cold, and crawling with silence. Their boots echoed off rusting walls as they moved in a tight line, flashlights low and weapons drawn. They followed a faint trail, broken branches, disturbed soil, and blood that hadn't dried yet. After 2 hours, they found the first sign of something unnatural. A clearing. Circular. Trees hacked clean in perfect lines. At the center stood a cage, empty, but surrounded by chains and feed buckets. Nearby, torn-up tarps, syringes, and scorched earth suggested the prototypes had been held here. Someone kept them here, Asha whispered. Before letting them loose. Nico knelt beside the scorched ground. Something burned. Fuel or chemicals. You smell that? Marlo did. Chlorine and something else. This wasn't infection. It was synthesis. Iris launched the drone. The tiny machine zipped above the trees, transmitting grainy footage back to her wrist screen. What it saw made her stomach drop. A camp. Hidden by hills. Massive tents. Solar lights. And people in white hazard suits moving between tables filled with vials, restraints, and body bags. A lab. A field lab in the open. But before they could zoom in closer, a pulse burst from one of the tents, an electromagnetic shockwave. The drone fizzled and dropped. They have jammers, Iris muttered. They knew we'd come. From the trees behind them, a twig snapped. Then another. Iris spun around, rifle raised. Marlo and Asha joined her, flanking Nico. Eyes scanned the brush. The air was too still. And then, they came. Silent, fast, coordinated. 5 infected. Not walkers, mutated like the prototypes. But this time, they didn't scream. They didn't rush blindly. They circled. Hunting. Marlo fired first. One went down. Iris took another. Asha clipped a third. But they kept moving, reacting, dodging gunfire. They learned, Iris shouted. They fought like wolves. With tactics. When the last one fell, they didn't cheer. They only stared at the blood on the leaves, and realized something new. The undead weren't the only danger anymore. Someone out there had turned the apocalypse into a lab experiment. And they'd just made contact. The bodies of the mutated infected lay sprawled across the clearing, steam rising from the wounds. But even dead, they looked wrong, too human in places, too engineered in others. Their muscles were knotted like they'd been force-grown, their teeth filed into jagged rows. Someone hadn't just infected them. Someone had built them. Iris crouched beside one, nudging its half-open eye with her glove. No response. Still dead, for now. We need to move, Marlowe said, scanning the trees. If there were 5, there could be more. Asha reloaded her weapon, nodding. We're too close to their ground. But Nico stood frozen, staring at the tree line. Guys, what's that? He said. They turned as one. On the far edge of the clearing stood 2 figures. Not infected. Not survivors. People in clean, white hazmat suits. The strangers didn't run. Didn't raise weapons. They simply observed. Iris lifted her rifle. Dropped to the ground. Now. No response. A second later, the 2 vanished into the forest like ghosts. Follow them. Iris barked. They pushed through the brush, branches clawing at their clothes, mud grabbing at their boots. The trail led them down into a shallow ravine and up the other side, but when they reached the ridge, the suited strangers were gone. What remained, however, stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't a camp. It was a facility. Carved into the earth like a secret bunker, the structure had heavy concrete walls, solar lighting disguised under tree canopies, and what looked like a freight elevator descending into the hillside. Someone's been building here for a long time, Asha whispered. Marlowe pointed at the symbol etched into a rusted metal plate by the entrance, 3 overlapping triangles, burned black. Ever seen that before? He asked. Iris stared at it. No. But it feels like something we were never supposed to see. Before they could plan next steps, the forest behind them lit up, red beams. Laser sights. Voices barked orders. Down. On the ground now. From the trees, more figures in white emerged, armed, this time. Their rifles were clean. Their steps rehearsed. Not just survivors, trained enforcers. Iris raised her hands slowly. We don't want trouble. We're from Zone Echo. We're just trying to understand what's going on. You're trespassing on a controlled testing perimeter, said a voice through a mask. You've interfered with a field experiment. Those were people you unleashed, Marlowe snapped. You murdered them. They were volunteers, the masked figure replied coldly. They signed off. For the greater good. Nico flinched. Volunteers? You're saying people chose to become like that? The world ended, the figure said. We're building what comes next. The group was stripped of weapons and blindfolded. Iris memorized the sound of the elevator locking into place, the subtle hum of its descent. They were taken underground, deep, judging by the pressure in her ears and the temperature drop. When the blindfolds came off, they stood in a wide, sterile hall of metal and concrete. Lights buzzed above. Surveillance cameras watched every angle. And then a door opened. From it stepped a woman in a dark gray coat, different from the soldiers. She wasn't wearing a mask. Her hair was tied back, streaked with silver, her expression unreadable. I'm Dr. Celine Ward, she said. Director of Project Rebirth. What the hell is Project Rebirth? Iris asked. Celine didn't answer. She turned and began walking. They followed. As they moved through the corridors, windows showed what lay behind the walls, labs filled with incubators, 4 bags, restraints. Monitors showing brain scans. And bodies, some sedated and still twitching. Others, barely recognizable. We are what remains of ARC, Celine said. The Advanced Renewal Coalition. Our mission was to develop biotechnological defense systems before the fall. Now, we develop survivable evolution. Asha shook her head. You're creating monsters. Celine stopped walking. I'm creating the future, she said quietly. Those who adapt survive. The rest, fade. You live in a relic, Commander Vance. A world of old rules. We're rewriting them. You're experimenting on people, Marlowe said. That's not survival. That's madness. You'd be surprised how many choose this, Celine said. The promise of strength. Speed. Immunity. We don't force change. We offer it. Iris stared at her. What happens to the ones who can't control the change? Celine looked toward a dark window. Inside, something enormous shifted, humanoid, but not quite human. They're part of the learning curve. Suddenly, alarms blared. A soldier burst in. Director. Perimeter breach, multiple contacts. Unknown force. Echo zone, she asked. No. Something else. Celine's face shifted. Secure the test subjects. Move the command staff. She turned to Iris. You'll be held until the breach is contained. If you cooperate, you may get to see the next stage. Guards grabbed the four. But as they were dragged down another corridor, Nico twisted toward Iris. We need to escape. I know, Iris said. Because whatever was breaching this facility, wasn't them. And if even these monsters were panicking, then something far worse was coming. The sirens didn't stop. The cold, metallic hallway pulsed with red lights, throwing wild shadows across the steel walls as Iris and her team were led deeper into the facility. The guards moved faster now, more urgent, less controlled. Whatever had triggered the alarm wasn't a routine threat. It was something they weren't prepared for. What kind of breach? Iris demanded as they were shoved into a holding cell. You said we weren't the only ones out there. What's coming? The guard slammed the door shut without answering. The magnetic locks clicked with finality. Inside, the cell was clinical, steel benches, a grated floor, and a surveillance camera blinking above the reinforced door. Iris turned to Nico, who was already scanning the vents. There's airflow here, he said. Probably runs into maintenance shafts. Too small to crawl through, Asha said. But maybe not too small to short out the sensors, Marlowe added. He pulled a small, flat tool from his boot, contraband, technically. But no one had time for rules anymore. Iris moved to the door and began studying the access panel. If we're lucky, they didn't reprogram every lock since the world fell. A rumble echoed through the facility. Not from above, but below. The floor vibrated. Distant screaming, short, sharp, and human, cut through the mechanical wail of the alarms. Marlowe looked up. That's not coming from outside. Asha's voice was barely above a whisper. Something's loose in here. 2 levels down, chaos consumed the lower corridors. The containment wing, where failed mutations were kept sedated and secured, had suffered a full blackout. Surveillance was down. Emergency teams sent into the sector hadn't reported back. And then, the glass broke. Out of the dark, a creature emerged. It had once been human, male, tall, but was now something else entirely. Its skin was semi-translucent, stretched over muscles that pulsed like something breathing inside out. Tubes that once fed it chemicals dangled from its spine like black tendrils. It moved silently. Efficiently. Then it vanished around a corner. The guards who chased it never returned. Back in the cell, Marlowe managed to pry off the wall panel. Behind it, a nest of wires blinked and sparked. Got it, he said. Just need 30 seconds. Iris watched the camera. We don't have 30. Footsteps, heavy ones, pounded down the hallway. But it wasn't soldiers. It was something faster. Marlowe. Nico hissed. Sparks flew. Then, click. The door swung open. They didn't wait. Iris led them into the corridor, weapons stolen from an abandoned security crate. They moved quickly, retracing their path toward the elevator shaft, but found it jammed. Manual overrides fried, Nico said. We go up the maintenance ladders, Iris replied. Through the core. They slipped into a maintenance duct just as something slammed into the hallway behind them. A shriek followed. Not undead. Not mechanical. Something else. They climbed. For minutes, all that existed was the clang of boots on rungs and the sound of distant screaming. Meanwhile, above, Director Celine Ward stared at a monitor in the upper control room. She was alone now, her guards were either dead or fighting whatever had broken containment. Blood smeared the floor behind her. One of her assistants had tried to flee, Celine hadn't stopped him. She couldn't. The screens flickered. The cameras went dark. And for the first time in years, she felt fear. Not of failure. But of what they'd created. Phase 2 hadn't been initiated by her order. Something had triggered it manually, from inside the test subject containment logs. Someone had sabotaged the schedule. An inside job. And the results were uncontrollable. Iris and her team burst into the upper lab corridor. Fires burned in broken offices. Automated doors blinked red, stuck mid-open. And through one of the shattered glass walls, they saw it. The escaped subject. It moved like smoke, silent, fast, intelligent. It stopped mid-stride and turned toward them. Its head tilted, not in confusion, but in curiosity. Then it charged. Move! Iris yelled. They dove, rolling beneath twisted piping as the creature slammed into the wall, tearing through steel like paper. It wasn't just strong, it was purposeful. It didn't kill at random. It chased. They sprinted toward the emergency hatch. Facility exits through the south access port. Asha shouted. We'll never make it if it cuts us off again. Nico warned. Then we make it now. Iris growled. The creature let out a low, rattling noise, like breath caught in a broken chest, and lunged again. This time, Marlowe turned and fired. A single incendiary round, retrieved from the dead guard earlier, hit it square in the chest. The explosion wasn't massive. But it was enough. The creature staggered. Flesh burned. It howled. And that was their moment. They ran. Down the corridor, through a cracked bulkhead, and into a tunnel that led upward to the surface. Behind them, the creature rose again. Burning. Screaming. Learning. As they emerged from the hillside into open air, the first thing Iris saw was the horizon. Smoke curled above the forest canopy. Zone Echo was still out there, waiting. But something had changed. A storm was gathering. Not of weather, but of war. And somewhere far below, in a lab crumbling under its own hubris, the true horror of Project Rebirth was only just beginning to awaken. The sky above Zone Echo burned with the orange haze of early dusk as Iris, Asha, Marlowe, and Nico returned, bloody, exhausted, and shaken to the core. Their return should have sparked celebration. But instead, they were met with rifles aimed squarely at them. Hold position, yelled Vex, the perimeter guard commander. We clocked you outside the outer boundary 15 minutes ago, we didn't know if you were still human. Iris didn't flinch. Scan us. Do it now. Juno arrived moments later with a portable scanner. She moved fast, checking pupils, heart rates, and thermal readings. The results came back clean, normal vitals. No traces of viral mutation. Clear, she said. Her voice cracked, either from relief or fear. The guards lowered their weapons. But the questions were just beginning. They gathered in the war room, every team lead, every fighter, every scavenger chief. Zone Echo's heart was thumping again, not with celebration, but dread. They were surrounded by something far worse than the undead now. Iris stood at the front, blood still drying on her sleeves. We found a facility underground, she began. Human-made. Active. And guarded. Its name was Project Rebirth. Whispers rose instantly. They're engineering the infected, she continued. Not curing them. Not fighting them. Designing them. She pulled a sample vial from her pouch, salvaged from the broken bunker before escape. A shimmering red-gold liquid swirled inside. This is what they were injecting into volunteers. Juno took it and held it up to the light. This isn't standard mutation fluid. It's something else. Nanite activity. Synthetic proteins. This was crafted. Crafted to make them stronger. Faster. Smarter, Iris said. We fought them. Some of them worked together, hunted us. One nearly killed us all. And it's still down there. Elia stepped forward, pale. If it's alive, and it gets out. It already has, Marlowe interrupted. That silenced everyone. Iris looked around. Project Rebirth collapsed on itself. Someone, either a saboteur or something inside, triggered a breach. The facility's containment failed. Creatures escaped. We didn't see how many, but it wasn't just one. Juno's eyes widened. They're not mindless. They'll look for more test subjects. Resources. Power. Asha nodded. And they'll find us. Sooner or later. A heavy pause settled over the group. The kind that tastes like ash. Then Iris spoke again. I'm issuing Echo Zone's first general alert. All gates reinforced. No night patrols without direct command. Evacuation drills begin immediately. If these things come, we won't survive them with luck alone. That night, the survivors got no rest. The northern gate was fortified with concrete slabs and newly welded steel. The southern wall, a patchwork of vehicles and debris, was layered with barbed wire and motion-triggered alarms. Patrols doubled. Floodlights swept the darkness like search beams from old war documentaries. But despite all of it, there was a constant unease in the air. Because deep down, everyone knew they weren't ready. Nico sat alone on the wall, watching the tree line. His hands trembled, still stained from the creature's blood. He couldn't forget the sound it made as it burned, the scream. It wasn't rage. It was intelligent. As if it had recognized pain for the first time. And now? It would remember. Far outside Zone Echo, deep in the remains of the Project Rebirth facility, something stirred. The test subject who had escaped, Subject Delta 9, crouched in a ruined chamber. Fire danced along the walls, licking at wires and glass. The creature's skin had mostly healed, though one side of its chest was scorched black from Marlowe's incendiary shot. It breathed slowly. No longer erratic. Its eyes, once dead white, now glimmered with soft amber light. Not fully human. Not fully undead. Something else. It crawled toward the fallen body of a soldier. Not to feed. But to study. To learn. It found a datapad beside the corpse. It tapped the glass with one long, cracked nail. The screen blinked alive, biometric locks overridden from the inside. The creature tilted its head. It remembered the humans. It remembered pain. And it remembered Iris. Back in Echo Zone, Elia entered the command room, carrying something wrapped in cloth. I found this, she said, placing it on the table. Buried in the data logs from a supply run 6 months ago. She unwrapped it. A metal badge, worn and scratched, etched with 3 black triangles. Marlowe's breath caught. The same symbol from the bunker. Juno scanned it. It came from inside Echo Zone. Iris leaned forward. You're saying one of us used to work for Project Rebirth? Not just used to, Elia said. Someone inside this zone sent them a signal. The lab was waiting for us. They knew who we were. The weight of that truth hit like a storm surge. There's a traitor in Echo Zone, Asha whispered. And we need to find them, Iris said. Before they open the gates to hell. Because the monsters weren't just coming. They were already watching. A cold wind swept through Zone Echo's northern perimeter just past midnight. Spotlights hummed overhead, illuminating barbed wire and makeshift watchtowers, but even with the lights, something about the shadows felt wrong. Inside the command tent, Iris stood over a map of the compound with red markers placed at key points, gates, supply bunkers, armories. At the center was a new mark, a black triangle. The symbol of Project Rebirth. The reminder that someone in their zone had betrayed them. We narrowed the signal down to a 3-minute window, Elia said, tapping a tablet. It originated from somewhere between the med tent and the water pumps. That's at least 10 people, Marlowe muttered. 10 people who could have called in the enemy. No, Juno said quietly. 10 people who did. Iris exhaled. We start there. No accusations yet. Quiet questioning. We find the leak, we shut them down, fast. Asha entered the tent, soaked from perimeter patrol. We've got movement near the northern fence. Dead or living? Iris asked. Neither, Asha replied. It was watching us. Too far to shoot. Too fast to track. They all looked at one another. They're scouting us now, Nico said. That thing, the one we escaped, it's learning. And if it knows our defenses, it won't attack alone, Iris added. It'll wait for the right moment. Or the right signal. Silence fell again. We've got hours. Maybe less, Marlowe said grimly. If they come, it'll be tonight. An hour later, Iris and Marlowe moved through the lower camp, quietly questioning key personnel, off-duty mechanics, water pump operators, medics. Most were tired, overworked, and furious at the idea of a mole in their ranks. No one leaves camp, Iris ordered. No solo shifts. Everything logged. If someone so much as scratches their nose out of line, I want to know. As they made their way toward the medical tent, they found Elia waiting. I checked the broadcast tower logs, she said. It was accessed through a secondary console near the generator, one used for emergency signals. Marlowe frowned. We don't have emergency signals anymore. Exactly, Elia said. Someone rewired it manually. That narrowed the list to people who understood the old systems, engineers. Tech crew. Communications officers. But one name stood out. Dr. Hal Rennick. He had worked on the camp's old solar network and served as Juno's assistant in the biolab. Iris turned sharply. Where is he now? Elia hesitated. He went off shift 2 hours ago. Was supposed to be sleeping in quarters C. Marlowe didn't wait. He ran. They found quarters C empty. Rennick's bunk was untouched. His gear, gone. On the mattress was a single item, a silver data shard labeled, Cleansing Fire, Authorized. Encryption's military grade, Elia said, inserting it into a secure reader. This wasn't just for research. Nico stepped into the doorway, panting. Perimeter sensors just went dark. North wall. They're coming. Iris stuffed the shard into her jacket and grabbed her rifle. This is it. Outside, the camp turned electric. Sirens wailed. Spotlights flared to life. Guards scrambled to posts. Children were rushed into the underground shelter. But by then, the enemy had already arrived. They moved through the trees like vapor, silent, fast, coordinated. Not infected. Not quite human either. Rebirth's creations. The first wave crashed into the north gate, 5, maybe 6 of them. Not mindless attackers. They targeted floodlights, broke tripwires, disabled cameras. Iris took aim from the top of the command center and dropped one with a clean shot to the skull. It twitched. And stood back up. "They regenerate," she shouted. "Aim for the head, and keep aiming." More poured in, some crawling, some leaping from trees like wolves. One tore through a guard tower like it was made of matchsticks. "Marlowe! Get the kids to the fallback zone," Iris shouted. He nodded, grabbing a pair of radios and sprinting into the fray. Down below, Asha and Nico fought side by side, holding a narrow choke point behind a half-crushed school bus. "We can't hold them," Nico yelled, firing blindly into the dark. Asha didn't flinch. "We just need 5 more minutes. Long enough for the fail-safe." Iris blinked. "What fail-safe?" Juno's voice crackled through her earpiece. "That data shard, it's a kill command. Rennick wasn't just a traitor. He planned to use this to wipe everyone here. Says it was, for purification. But we can flip it." Iris ducked a lunging creature and screamed into her comm, "How?" "I need time," Juno said. 10 minutes to recode it, turn his command into an EMP, might fry their enhancements. Iris scanned the field, explosions, screams, blood. "You've got 5. As chaos swirled around Zone Echo, Hal Rennick stood alone in the hills, a mile away. Through binoculars, he watched the compound burn. He whispered to himself. Rebirth through fire. As promised. But he never saw the figure behind him. Silent. Pale. Burning with rage. Subject Delta 9 had followed them. And now, it watched its creator. Hal turned. His scream never reached the camp. Back in Echo Zone, Juno shouted, "EMP ready." "Do it!" Iris cried. A moment later, every creature in the field jerked, froze, then screamed in unison. They collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Silence. And then, only the sound of wind through broken walls. Zone Echo was still standing. But barely. Would you like to continue with Part 8, the final chapter? The sun rose slowly over Zone Echo, casting long shadows across the battered compound. Fires still burned in places. Ash floated in the wind like the remains of forgotten hope. The walls were cracked, the watchtowers reduced to twisted steel, and the scent of scorched earth clung to every surface. But somehow, they had survived. Iris stood at the north wall, her rifle resting against the rubble. Below her, bodies of rebirth creatures lay scattered, still twitching, some smoldering. Juno's improvised EMP had saved them all. But at a terrible cost. They had lost 12 more people in the attack. Defenders. Friends. And Hal Rennick, traitor, scientist, saboteur, was found the next morning in the woods. Or rather, what was left of him was found. Torn apart, face frozen in shock. There was no mistaking the message. Subject Delta 9 had ended him. But it hadn't come for the others. Not yet. Inside the medical tent, survivors with burns, fractures, and shredded flesh filled every cot. Juno moved quickly, treating injuries and distributing rations while scanning every wound for signs of infection. The rebirth creatures didn't bite like zombies, but their claws carried something. They didn't spread death. They spread fear. Asha helped stitch a gash in Nico's arm. He winced, but didn't complain. "We shouldn't have lived," he muttered. "Not after that." "But we did," Asha said softly. "And that means something." Iris entered the tent moments later, carrying the cracked data shard. She dropped it onto the metal tray beside Juno. "I need to know everything this thing still holds." Juno nodded. Give me a few hours. No. Give me the truth. Later that night, under the flickering lights of the war room, Juno laid it out for them all. Project Rebirth wasn't a cure. It was a contingency. A way to evolve past the undead. They wanted to replace humanity. Everyone in the room went silent. The creatures we fought were just Phase 2, Juno continued. Phase 3 was integration. A hybrid. One that could think, strategize, rebuild. They wanted to inherit the Earth, Marlowe said, voice low. They still might, Juno said. And there's more. The project was global. What we fought here, what Hal Rennick activated, it's happening in other zones too. How many? Iris asked. Juno looked away. We don't know. The data's incomplete. But one thing's clear, the Rebirth network is still online. And Delta 9 knows how to access it. A murmur spread through the group. Asha leaned forward. So what do we do? Iris didn't blink. We rebuild. Stronger. We send a signal to every survivor left out there. Tell them what we saw. Warn them. And if we're the last stronghold in this country, then we make it count. In the days that followed, Zone Echo transformed again. They buried their dead with quiet words and solemn hands. The gates were reinforced with armored scrap. The watchtowers rebuilt with salvaged steel beams. Floodlights powered by solar arrays lit the camp through the night, and every survivor trained daily, regardless of age. The children were taught to listen first, move second. Even the injured stood watch, rifles across their laps. Juno worked tirelessly to decode the remaining data, mapping fragments of other rebirth facilities, tracking potential coordinates where other subjects might still be active. But through it all, a single truth echoed across every rebuilt wall. The war wasn't over. 2 weeks later, a garbled radio transmission broke through. Faint. Desperate. Zone Sierra, repeating, survivors, overrun, need assistance. Iris stared at the speaker, her fists clenched. Zone Sierra had once been an outpost like theirs. A place of safety. If it had fallen, others were next. And if the creatures were spreading, so was their network. We're going, she said. Asha nodded. How many? 10. A recon team. We find out what happened. We see if anyone's left. And if the monsters are there, we stop them before they move west. What if we don't come back? Marlowe asked. Iris turned to the crowd gathering behind them, new recruits, older fighters, children now training with slings and spears. Then Zone Echo holds the line, she said. Like we always do. Far beyond their walls, deep within a forest riddled with shattered cities and fallen satellites, Delta 9 stood on the ruins of an old transmission tower. It held something in its hand, an Echo Zone helmet, cracked and burned. It had watched the humans survive. Adapt. Learn. Just like it had. But unlike them, it didn't grieve. It didn't rest. It evolved. Its eyes turned east, toward Zone Sierra. It stepped forward, merging back into the forest. Not to destroy. To prepare. Because even in a world that had gone silent, the war was only beginning. And the dead were no longer mindless. They were becoming something more.